Let's practice an NPTE practice question together. My name is Dr. Yash Shah, DPT, and today we're going to be going through typical PT's NPTE platform. Let's begin. Okay, so the question states that during morning rounds in the Pediatric burn unit, a physical therapist evaluates a 7-year-old boy with superficial partial thickness burns that span the full anterior trunk and the entire anterior surface of his right lower extremity. Using the pediatric rule of nines, what total percentage of the child's body surface is affected? And the answer choices we have available are A, 27%, B, 18%, C, 25%, and D, 31.5%. Okay, so let's try to figure this out. If you don't know the rule of nines for adults and kids, it's going to be really hard to get this right. So that's one of the things that I would ingratiate into your memory bank. Like, make sure you know that. It's not very hard. Write it down somewhere in your notes. Put it in a Quizlet or Anki deck. Make sure you know those two. So let's go over the question and what we need to know. So the child is 7 years old. Thus, we definitely need to know the pediatric rule of nines for this. And we know that the child has burns along the anterior trunk and the entire anterior surface of his right lower extremity. Okay, so what would that be? The anterior trunk for both adults and children is 18%. So that one we got off the bat. This is where the tricky part comes in though, the legs. So in adults, the anterior surface of the lower extremity is 9%, but in children, it's 7%. And that's just because children have smaller limbs than adults do in proportion to their body. So, when knowing that, we could say that if it's 18 plus 7, it's got to be 25, making answer choice C correct. Okay, we got it right, as did about 65% of other students. Awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at the explanations and see why answer choice C is correct. So at typical PT, we pride ourselves on our explanations. We try to provide really detailed explanations explaining why the question is correct and explaining why the incorrect answers are incorrect and in what instances they would have been correct. So let's take a deep dive into this question. As you can see in this explanation, it tells us that, as we said prior, the anterior trunk accounts for about 18%, the anterior right lower extremity accounts for about 7%, meaning that the child has burned about 25% of their body according to the rule of nines. In this explanation, you'll see that we have a picture of the pediatric rule of nines. In most of our explanations, we try to include some form of like tips and tricks, tables, infographs, videographs, like anything that we can do to help improve your understanding of the material. And you can always document that information down in the notebook right here on the side. Okay, let's continue. So on this, you can see that 18% and 7% makes up about 25, and you can use this right here to practice all your other pediatric rule of nine questions. Now let's take a look at the incorrect answers. So answer choice A is incorrect because 27% is just too much for this child. If this person was an adult though, this answer would actually be correct. So in children, the anterior trunk is 18%. That's true for adults as well. But in adults, the anterior right lower extremity and the left lower extremity are 9%, not 7%. So 18 plus 9 would be 27, and that would be correct if this person was an adult. Answer choice B, 18% is incorrect because that primarily only accounts for the anterior trunk and not the right lower extremity. And answer choice D, 31.5%, is incorrect because that overestimates the percentage burned. So if this person had burns along the anterior and posterior aspect of the right lower extremity and the anterior trunk, then that would be about 32%. In that instance, this might be correct. Or if they had burns along the anterior surfaces of the right and left extremity, then that might be right. But considering this patient only had burns along the anterior trunk and right anterior lower extremity, it overestimates and it would be too much. I hope that makes sense. Prior to doing any practice test or reviewing, I like to always read over Typical PT's Physical Therapy Essentials book. It's fantastic. And I say that being one of the main authors of the book. So here's the page in the textbook, and this is a page that I would like you to screenshot or save somewhere, put somewhere. It's going to be super helpful because the NPTE loves to test you on the rule of nines. So let's go over a couple examples really quickly too. Specifically ours as well. Okay, so here's the pediatric rule of nines. So we know that the child had burns along the anterior trunk, which is 18%, and the anterior right lower extremity, right there, which is 7%. So 18 plus 7, that's 25. We got that. One of the key differentiators between kids and adults that I want you to remember is that, look, the child's head takes up about 9%, whereas in an adult, it takes up about 4.5%. That's one of the big differentiators. And then also in adults, the legs take up 9% on the anterior surfaces and posterior surfaces, whereas in children, they take up about 7%. So if the question were to ask you, let's say the child had burns along the anterior and posterior trunk, what would it be? That would be 36. That would be the same for adults as well. Let's say it asked about the entire right lower extremity. Well, that would be 7 for the anterior and 7 for the posterior, which would be 14. Let's say they asked you about the entire anterior trunk and the entire anterior and posterior lower extremities. So then we would have 18, and then we'd have 7 times 2, which is 14, times 2 again, both sides here, which is another 14. So we have 28 plus 18, which is going to be 46%. All right? So that's something you just need to be able to do off the top of your head. Check out Typical PT for all your NPTE and PT school resources. And while you're there, try taking our free diagnostic NPTE exam to see exactly where you stand before the big day. Remember guys, study smarter, not harder. This is Dr. Yash Shah, signing off. Bye-bye.